Hello and welcome to episode 20 of Late Night Linux, recorded on the 18th of September 2017. I'm Joe, and with me are Jesse.
Good evening, Joe.
Phelim.
Good morning, Joe.
And Ikey.
Good afternoon, Joe.
It's one of those who knows which. So we've finally got a full house again. Phelim is back after his many adventures. And the fact that there's all KDE bollocks first up in the news is proof that he's back. So what's going on with all these exciting developments?
Lots is going on. Recently it's been the Randa meetup, which they've been working on accessibility, mountains of stuff and apps. They've been getting ready for Wayland even more. Just getting everybody together, meet up in the mountains in Switzerland, and I imagine eat lots of cheese and code. It just sounds like a delight, stuck in a cabin in the mountains like that. But yes, on they go.
So is this solely for KDE Plasma on the desktop, or KDE Plasma on the mobile as well, or just anything with the KDE in the brand?
It's been a mix. They've been working a lot on Kirigami as well, which is a framework to help get stuff onto the phones and stuff. So there's been things like Marble. They've been working hard on that to improve that. That,
for the uninitiated who isn't using their KDE phone at this very moment, is the mapping application.
Oh, the bitterness. Yes, I too am not using my KDE phone, and I'm not even using it on my Android phone. In fact, one complaint of this is the fact that they've got things like K-Stars and Marble into... what's the Google one called where they have apps?
Play Store.
Yes. So they've got them in there, but you can't get them on F-Droid, which is really bizarre, as I would have thought that wouldn't have been a big issue. But I imagine they're probably using some sort of Google service for some of the data sharing or something. At least I know in K-Stars that was one of the reasons.
Yeah, I was on F-Droid the other day, and the Firefox implementation that you and I use, Joe, isn't called Firefox Fast, or it's
Focus.
Focus, thank you. It's called like Ilda or something weird. I couldn't understand why they wouldn't just use the brand. It's got the same logo and all that kind of stuff. It all works the same.
They probably had to modify it so they could take out the stuff that Firefox thought they just couldn't do without the stat stuff. And once they did that, it wouldn't be valid to call it that.
Yeah, maybe. All right, so speaking of KDE, last time we spoke about the new Purism phone that is no doubt getting you excited, Phelim.
Not excited enough to spend all that money on potential vaporware, but yeah.
So this is the Librem 5, and it was supposed to be shipping with GNOME, and now it looks like it's going to ship with Plasma Mobile.
Yeah, because they've clearly seen the light. All of those phones that they've tried to build that are based on GTK that have never worked. Spot the common thread.
To be fair, it's not really GTK, because GNOME Shell doesn't use GTK at all. So, no. But yeah, no, you shouldn't use it on a phone.
Involving GTK then, fine.
But you shouldn't use it on a phone. Yeah, they're quite right.
Yeah, no, this is interesting. This is really good. Like, I'd be well keen on this. If I literally hadn't just got a new phone last year, and I am not the type of person who will buy a phone just for the sake of getting the latest shiny. If I hadn't been or in the market for one, then I would have potentially pitched into it. I don't know. It is a big risk though, and they have delivered the last one, so yeah, I don't know. But yeah, I would love if this works. It'd be fantastic.
But on the crowdfunding page, did Purism actually note the distribution or the operating system they're going to use on their phone? Because it seems like an odd thing to come out quite late in the day and say we're talking to KDE, or is KDE going to be an alternative?
It looks like GNOME is going to be the alternative, because you've got KDE, by the looks of things, Plasma Mobile as the default, I think. But that's the whole problem I have with this, is that it's just too up in the air. There's no specs for the phone, and they just seem to be chopping and changing and just don't seem to have their shit together.
That'll be grand. Just give them the money. I want you to invest in it.
But when you say there's no specs for the phone, but in the announcement that came out, it sort of said that the KDE team now had specific hardware to target, which implies that, you know, the guys at Librem must have some idea or have a good idea as to what they're putting in it. And if the phone isn't quite finalized and the KDE software isn't quite finalized, it seems like the right time for them to come together and say, okay, let's really focus this in one place. Let's really focus the phone hardware and the software to get to this one place together. And I don't know if you have like certain friends who are always chasing the cool thing and they never quite get to the cool thing because they're always one step behind. And there's another friend who just does what they like. And eventually it just turns out that by pure fluke, the world turns around and the thing they're doing is what is in the right place at the right time. And it feels like that's kind of where KDE is. They were making this phone operating system without any real specific target. You know, they were doing it because it was a good idea. They wanted to make a free and open source phone alternative, and they had no real end goal as far as I could see, apart from to make a phone OS. And now this phone's come along and they sort of married up together.
Yeah, well, if you think about it, though, Aaron Saigo invested over 100 grand of his own money. I think it was over 100 grand of his own money to try build a tablet back a few years ago.
I remember the one, yep.
Go down in flames. He obviously tried quite hard to get that going, and they did work on this stuff kind of in that aim, the fact that they realized, well, look, it's going to go mobile by the looks of it. So, you know, better to have everything set up and ready to go beforehand. Even if you're not using it, at least you can switch it on fairly quickly if you do.
Well, I do want it to happen, but I'm not going to back it.
Yeah.
So I think that's a lot of people.
We just need to get some other suckers that'll do it for us.
Yeah, pretty much. And hopefully it won't be one of these crowdfunders where it's a certain amount if you back it in the crowdfunder and then twice that if you buy it from Amazon after it's funded.
Yeah.
I mean, we haven't asked the most important question here, I think. I mean, yeah, we've dealt with the issue of specs and, you know, what software is going to be on it. Will it have a torchlight app?
It'll have a clock.
Yeah, that's not going to penetrate the market.
How about a torch-like clock? You could shine the numbers on the screen or the wall.
How about instead of any buttons, you just look at it and it scans your face and then unlocks?
Is that out of fear or because it needs to?
Like, imagine if you had like no bezels as well on it. That'd be the best phone ever. You could charge like £1,000 for it.
Well, let's use a reliable currency first.
Well, £1,000, $1,000. Well, anyway, enough of that nonsense. Let's talk more about phones, though, and talk about Replicant. Now, Replicant is something that you have tried out in the past, Phelim. It is a totally free and open source, totally free version of Android, or it certainly aims to be that, with no blobs and no proprietary bullshit in it. And as a result of that, it only supports or only supported a few phones and is based on quite an old release of Android. But now they've expanded the number of phones that they are targeting up to 12. 12 devices anyway, which is sort of double the number of before. And one of them is interesting to me in that it is the Galaxy S3, which is a phone that you have, Jesse. So I don't know if it supported it before, but now I'm telling you about it. Your homework is to go away and flash it and come back and tell us how you got on.
Okie dokie. I can do that. Yeah, the S3 is in my...
Have you done it yet?
No, not yet. I wouldn't tarnish the download speed of my internet whilst recording, of course. It's in the drawer of things that might be useful in the future. And the S3 has saved me a number of times because it's still a great, when you buy a flagship phone, it sort of lasts the test of time. So, I can flash that on there. I think do I have a memory that we looked at it on an old podcast?
No, never Replicant. I've never had a device that it supports. Because the latest Nexus is, I think, the Galaxy Nexus or something, or maybe the Nexus S. I don't know. It's pre my Nexus buying anyway. It doesn't support the Nexus 4. So, but Phelim, you've kind of played with it a bit, haven't you? Was that with an S3?
No, because I didn't actually have a phone for Replicant back in the day because it was only supporting a S2, I think, and one of the Nexuses, as you say. Is it Nexi? Whatever. I don't know. No, I actually never had Replicant. I could never get that on. I was good at it because I would actually given it a shot. But the really annoying part was the fact that nothing on the particular phone that I was looking at buying actually would have worked. So I would have had a Wi-Fi browsing device, essentially. No, actually, I'm not even sure if I had Wi-Fi enabled. Yeah, I really don't know what the phone would have done because literally nothing would have worked on it. And that's the real problem with it. We just need... This is why I like the idea of what the, if you want to have Wi-Fi network and they have to have it closed source, then fine, but have it so it's a completely exterior device to the phone, not physically outside the case of the phone, but disconnected from the wires. Essentially, like if you were to plug in a modem through a USB port, have it that sort of separate.
Yeah. Oh, you mean like 4G or whatever, not Wi-Fi? Yeah, the actual phone bit.
That's what I meant. Yeah. Well, potentially even the Wi-Fi chip too, because if you're in the States, I don't think you can have an open Wi-Fi chip, as far as I know, because that is also FCC controlled. So anything that broadcasts that is got to be closed. And if that's the case, then you can't trust it. You certainly shouldn't have it like able to access the memory on the phone and switch things off and on. I mean, that's ridiculous. There should be no route for that to do it. You should be firewalled off as external network devices. But
yeah, what happened to your S3 that you smashed the screen of? Have you still got it?
Yeah, I guess technically I do still have it. Do you know what?
Does it actually work, or is it like dangerously smashed?
I don't know how dangerous it is. It's like, this is not the first time that I've regretted the fact that it got damaged, because also for Lineage, it was like one of the first to get an image up and running. It's like, I don't know how many people must have the S3. It's clearly very popular, and it's really irritating.
Well, you should dig it out and have a go, see if it works, and it'd be good to have both of you talk about it.
With splinters of glass in my finger.
I'll just get a screen protector and stick that on top. That's what I did for a smashed screen.
You can only do that once, as then you try and peel it back off. It's like,
I thought this was going to be quite a modern Android, and I looked up, because they talked about Lineage OS, and I've just looked up Lineage OS 13, and they're talking about Lineage OS 4, and that was 8 months ago, and 14 isn't even O. Lineage OS 15 is Android O, so they're 2 Androids ago, so it's not...
I think it's 6, isn't it? It's
Replicant is based on 6, and it's taken fixes back from Lineage OS 13.0. And from what I've seen, it doesn't have 3D graphics support on any of the supported devices.
Who needs 3D?
Me. And my phone's not listed. I'm quite sad.
What do you need 3D for on a phone?
Just because.
He puts it in his Google Cardboard and pretends he's controlling his giant Solus computer back at home from hackers.
It shows for pretty much all devices. I don't see a single fully supported device there.
Is that why you patched the password prompt in Solus to only be 3 characters long?
How did you know?
Yeah, well, that's why I want to hear someone. I mean, if any audience members have tried it out, I'd love to know what it's actually like, because I just don't have a supported device and I'm not going to buy one for the sake of it. So if someone wants to donate me an old S3, then let me know if you're in London or whatever.
You're such a scrounger.
Well, yeah, there's got to be some perks to doing this.
He was giving away hardware last show, so it's fair to ask. However, we move on to Joe's other top favourite topic, which is smartwatches.
Yes, AsteroidOS, which I was part of the reason why I bought my Sony Smartwatch 3 to check it out, and it didn't really work very well. But now they're having a crowdfunder for the Connect Watch, which is going to have it installed by default. So this is a proper open source smartwatch OS, which is pretty niche, fair enough, but I use a smartwatch every day. So I'm reasonably excited about this, not to the point where I'm going to back it again, partially because it's on a French site. I managed to take the FR out of the URL, but it's a French site, and it's not doing massively well. It's got 18 days left, and it's almost a quarter funded. They're only looking for 26,000 quid, nearly 27. That must be, 30,000 euros or something, 25,000? I don't know. Not good at maths. But it looks good. We need to have a proper open source competitor in this area, I think. Well, not need, but it would be good. So I wish it all the best. I take it none of you lot are particularly interested in this.
Well, actually, yeah, I'd love one. I'm jealous. My wife's got a Fitbit, and all the stuff it can do, it's actually kind of cool. Because my other thing that I love is graphs, and it's kind of cool to be able to look at stuff where you go, oh, I am really, really, really lazy.
Yeah.
It might spur me to not be quite as lazy. I don't know, but I like the idea that you get notifications on your wrist, because I just can't get a phone that I can feel. Either the nerves in my leg are dead or irradiated beyond all compare. I don't know, but I just don't feel my phone moving. So it'd be great to have another way of getting a notification, you know.
Have you tried like leaving the speaker on?
Don't be ridiculous. I know, because actually the first time I turned it on the other week, I didn't know it was my phone that was ringing. I was like, oh, wow, that's a really cool ringtone. Who's got that? Oh, right, it's me.
So wait, you don't know your ringtone and you don't hear it vibrate?
Yeah.
Okay, right, fine, yeah. We'll...
It's pure chance. It's only the fact I look at the damn thing all the time that I actually notice stuff on it.
I think you actually need a town crier to follow you around.
Yeah.
But it's interesting you mentioned the Fitbit angle, because wearables, apart from Fitbit type devices, aren't doing well at all, it's fair to say. Even the Apple Watches are doing not as well as they'd hoped.
That's because they look terrible.
Well, who knows? But I think that if this Connect Watch has got good health tracking stuff, it's going to need that to be a success beyond this crowdfunder, basically, because it's all well and good. I'm not interested in the health stuff. I'm interested in notifications on my wrist, but most people want the health stuff as well. So that is crucially important to it. So we'll see if it gets made, how it develops, and maybe it will fund development for other existing devices, sort of, lineage style. And then I can actually get something up to date and working that doesn't have Blueborn on my wrist.
And also make sure that you can actually store the health information yourself, because opposed to your insurance provider demanding your data to see how fit you were and how much you lied on your house insurance application.
Insurance? We don't have any of that nonsense here. We have the good old NHS for now.
No, but life insurance, those crafty bookers are always trying to get out of paying anybody anything when they fall over. So,
yeah, that's true. Yeah. Well, here's hoping, and good luck to them. But I think they probably shouldn't have done it on a wacky French site. They should have done it on Indiegogo or Kickstarter. But what do I know? All right, well, let's finish up the news with public money, public code. I thought that there were no arguments against this until I spoke to Chris about it yesterday on Linux Action News. So it's the FSFE, the Free Software Foundation Europe, their campaign to bring in EU legislation that means that any public money that's spent on software, that code is open sourced. It seems like a no-brainer to me, but then national security basically is the only argument against it.
Yeah, but how much software is written that controls nuclear warheads or opens bunker doors and crap versus the ones that are the database for, not the database of the information in it, but like just the background database for holding all your information on the NHS, or, however they have the system for logging your driving record or whatever. It'd be useful if these things were available so that you could, maybe a driving school could then use it for their own bit of work, what have you. I agree there's always going to be a security side, but that's only a small part of what our public money goes to.
It would also make things like the NSA hacking code quite hard to do if they had to keep open sourcing it on their GitHub all the time.
But they wouldn't be allowed to put it on GitHub, would they? That's proprietary.
That's true. Monsters.
They could always use Launchpad. Lol.
Or try to restore it from backup from, what was the other Git guys? GitLab?
Yeah. But we need to get behind this, quite frankly. It's fucking outrageous that they spend my tax money on proprietary software that doesn't need to be proprietary. And if we were going to be staying in the EU, maybe I'd care a bit more. But as it is, it's definitely not going to happen in the UK, is it?
Yeah,
like
I was going to say,
types.
This is a .eu site. Frankly, we don't like your type round here.
Exactly. We don't like you either. So
as long as it comes in, as long as it comes in with the next, what have we got, a year until Brexit?
Yeah, and then it'll be in the Henry VIII bill, won't it?
Yeah, all their laws will come into our laws.
Yeah. We're in danger of turning into Linux Voice here with all this politics bollocks.
You're kind of assuming, though, that you own the money after it goes to the government and councils. That's not how tax works. Sorry, but it's not. While it would be nice, to say, oh, yeah, we own this, so it should be open. You actually don't, because you're giving your money to them for a deferred purpose. You don't own anything that the government and council do with it. They have to be liable to an extent, but they are there to serve the public interest. People assuming that they own what the governments do. If that was the case, we wouldn't be even arguing about whether the code should be open to be open in the first place. And we would have ownership of our own data and our own lives, but we don't. This is just, really sorry, but this is just people, assuming they own things. They don't.
We should.
Right, but then everything else has to change to support this, because when your stuff goes to the councils, goes to the governments, they have ownership over it. To them, you're just another number, aren't you? Like, not going down that path, because that's a conversation I don't want to have. But you relinquish a lot of rights and your rights over property when you're dealing with governments, because they're to deal with the stuff that we don't want to deal with. That's why they exist. So I think this is just more a case of self-entitlement, to be quite honest.
I wouldn't mind if they're writing their own code and keeping it public, but when they're forking out money to, nothing against Microsoft, well, sort of, but, the likes of just keeping all those big companies going, or those big consultancy firms going, it doesn't really help anybody. It does the exact opposite, because, if you spend 300 quid on Microsoft Office or whatever it costs, I have no idea, that's, 300 quid that could have been treatment for somebody for God knows what, and...
Well, I have a real simple example. Think of how many times you've ever gone to, like, any sort of government building or any council office. The waiting system. Even the waiting system is proprietary software, and each one of those has a license to do it. Each council has a license to do that. If stuff like that was open and shared, yes, it would be great. Don't get me wrong. I'm behind the idea of it. I'm just against the angle of it. Like, this is ours, we're entitled. That part is wrong. But I do think that they should be doing it. They should be free and open source. So that's a bit of a conflicting angle, but you can kind of get where I'm going with that. But yeah, then our money wouldn't be wasted. That's more what I'm concerned about. Like, the angle here is ownership, but yeah.
Well, we should own it, and we should be entitled to it if we pay tax, quite frankly.
No, because you don't own it. Once you give the money to them, that's their money. That tax money, there's even a process to get it back, and until that point, you don't own it anymore. They decide if they're going to give it back to you afterwards. It's still theirs.
But they are accountable, or they should be accountable.
If you don't want them doing stuff with your money, don't give it to them. Like, it's a catch-22, isn't it? You can't say that they do these things on our behalf.
Ikey's views are not the views of the other three members of the thing who he will now be getting arrested for.
Yeah, I know that. But, like, this is the whole thing. I've given money away to another thing, which I'm legally required to do, because these are taxes. You're legally required to do this stuff. But that is to support, obviously, the infrastructure of the country. Nothing then says that you own that. You don't own a road. You don't own somebody else, because that's the whole thing about, like binmen, people feeling entitled about how they talk to binmen. No, that's another employee who also has to pay tax and is funded by your tax money. Doesn't mean you fucking own them. Like, this is self-entitlement to the maximum. Yes, we should have open shared code, but no, you don't own it.
All right, well, we're not going to agree, so let's move on and talk about your tale of woe with regards your package hosting situation, which I think is now fixed, but you've had a bit of a time of it over the last week or so.
Yeah, because I don't own it. I won't go down that again. Yeah, so basically, it's kind of a story of scaling, isn't it? About 3 times now we've had to upscale Solus's infrastructure, and effectively now we just got to the point where we're completely saturated. Like, my connection is 100 meg, which is probably like the single fastest point in Ireland, I think, at this point. But some people have more than me. And I'm getting like 200 to 300 kilobits second download. And this isn't just me. This is like all of the Solus users complaining. So we've had to start getting clever, and it's getting to the point now where we're having to do complicated things like have CDNs and multiple networks and multiple mirrors. And I am not a sysadmin. So for me, this is all a bit complicated. Got to a point where we can no longer just be, like a single server setup. Like, it's no longer feasible. We have to scale horizontally, as they like to say.
So what have you done about it? So you've got a CDN going now then?
It's getting set up at the moment. Talks with some other lovely people, and once that's formal, you know me, I'm just going to keep talking about it once it's formal. They'll put a CDN in front of it, which effectively just caches everything and then distributes it all around the world, instead of just coming from a single point, which it's doing at the moment. And the server we have at the moment, I mean, it's on a 1 gigabits per second connection. And I'm not going to go into who they are or anything like that, but basically it's not just because it's saturated. Like, we've done some tests. The network on the server's end isn't coping, even though it hasn't got enough active connections that would really saturate that. Do you know what I mean? We're paying like for a premium line. Long story short, we're not getting the service we're paying for there. And that didn't really go anywhere. So now we're taking the extreme measure of sticking a CDN in front of it, which is kind of like having more laneways in a way. And then that can take all of the load off of the server that we have there at the moment.
There's a joke in there somewhere about taking all the load, but let's not do that. So, Jesse, you've been using Solus. Have you noticed it being slow and shit when you do your updates?
No, I assumed when you were talking about all of the people complaining, you meant all of your colleagues who are contributing and adding code and doing big pulls and pushes and all that sort of stuff, not your average guy downstream doing updates. It flies through the updates and it discombobulates the network efficiently, and I've not seen a problem. I mean, I don't have a 100 meg connection, so maybe I'm just too slow to see the difference.
It's kind of dependent on where you are in the world. Sometimes it seems to sort itself out, but then a few minutes later, it's completely flaked, and it feels a lot like artificial throttling sometimes. So the pipeline somewhere is sorely crippled, and getting a lot of complaints about it. So within the next couple of days, that should all finally be resolved. Because when you have stuff like that going on, I mean, you can't move fast as a project. You can't deploy stuff fast. If you've got urgent updates to get out and people are taking ages just to download them, it's ungood. So once all the changes are in this week for the infrastructure and replacing, because it's not all server problems, some of it's software as well. Like the scripts we've been managing the repos for, when we first put them in, however long ago, the repo was so much smaller then. It's actually grown. We do have packages. At the time, the scripts ran really, really fast. So we didn't know that there would be a scaling issue at the time. And now we are all the way down the line, and just doing something like a kernel build is setting us back a couple of hours now, which is very, very ungood. So that part is software as well as the network. And in another day or two, all of that will be done, and we can move fastly.
You're saying that a kernel takes a couple of hours now. What's the difference you've seen? I mean, what was it before?
I mean, again, this isn't just the network side. This is like the repo side itself taking forever as well, while the software indexes stuff and processes stuff. Before I could have the kernel put in and all of the dependent drivers that have to build against that kernel, I could have had that all done, say, within about 40 minutes. But now when I do the two kernels, I have to wait for those to finish. And then I'm waiting to do the local builds myself, which is taking a lot longer. I could be anywhere up to about 4 hours right now.
That's all going on your local network.
So that's the software and the network. Both of them are playing off each other and making it a lot worse than it needs to be. So it's taking a long time for me to get the software down locally to do the builds, for them to turn up on the servers. And then on top of having the network problems, the script that's in place at the moment is also shit. So that's slowing it down even more, to the point now it's ridiculous. But in the next couple of days, assuming Murphy doesn't strike again, because this was supposed to be finished this weekend. Murphy struck, and then I managed to break Golang. All of this should be fixed. We'll have fast repos on the server side and the network side itself, and we will be able to go a lot faster, like several 100% faster than we're going now. And then onboard people from the community as well. Like, we're upscaling everything. Like, you're not just going to do one part, we're upscaling all of it. So we're going to have more people on board as well. So, like, the package server at that point is just not going to stop. It's going to be updates. It's going to be awesome.
It sounds like growing pains and coming of age. And
it is a bit, because you make these naive decisions earlier on. Like, I should have known ahead of time that it was going to grow to a point where I'd probably need a CDN. Or I should have tested the scaling of the scripts back then to be able to deal with a very large repository. Not like what it was then, but you learn these as you go along, and then you have to build everything else to be like equally scalable in future. So I'm hoping this is the last big upscale we've got to do for a while. And I want it done in a way where we can just like plug more mirrors into the network and then get people to switch those mirrors in the software center. We put out an update so that they can just switch, use like GeoIP to find the local one and that sort of stuff.
And so are you looking for donations of mirrors from universities and stuff then?
I will not say no, actually. The strange thing is, we was going for a lot more bandwidth than we actually thought. Like right now we're going through over 20 terabytes a month on the package server, which when you think about the smaller repo size, the fact that we're using Delta packages and everything is compressed with XZ level 6, you know, I mean, the whole repo itself, including the unstable and stable side of it, including hard linking, a lot of deduplication, is 107 gigabytes. Right? That's the entire repo size. And we're going for over 20 terabytes a month.
Are you sure it is?
No, I did like DUH on there, so I definitely checked. So that's...
Why is my LS command 10 gigs big?
Yeah, what the hell's happened there? Yeah, so any mirrors, like any open source friendly mirrors who want to help us out, like, yeah, I'm not going to say no. And then we can plug it into like a big list so that you can do it in the software center. Running off of one mirror really isn't viable, and it was when we started ages ago, but then that's sort of more applicable to derivative projects that, you know, they're already piggybacking off another infrastructure. We've got to do what like Debian and Arch and Ubuntu and everyone has already done before us. And now we're starting to build that first network. So it's exciting and stressful times.
Doesn't reproducibility come into play then if you're looking at mirrors?
Yes and no. So we've actually had a lot of reproducible builds for a long time in Solus. We just didn't make a big thing about it. The build tools have already supported that for a long time, and they'll use fixed timestamps from the Git log to do that. There are some places it can get better, like when we go to the new GCC. But I think in terms of establishing a mirror's identity, I guess that's important. And once we replace EO package with Sol, which I don't think I'm going to use that name anymore. Like, I wanted to use Sol because it was short for Solus, right? But it also means shit out of luck.
Yeah.
It's not really what you want to call your package manager.
Right now, it's very feasible, right?
Oh, yeah, it's apt almost.
Ooh, clever.
Yeah, I mean, GPG signatures on the indexes is probably what we're going to do going forward. But the way it's been so far, we've had the central mirror, and that's always been SSL with our own search coming from us and using HSTS, so it hasn't really been a problem until now. But yeah, verifying that you're actually using a legit mirror is probably saying, which is why I want the mirror list centralized in the software center and not just some random thing that you go grab from a wiki and it's like, add these lines to etc app list these. No.
Yeah, well, it sounds like you're on top of it at last because it's been dragging on a bit, this problem, hasn't it? So
yeah, it's been going on for a while and it's kind of depressing, but once you get out of it, then you can move fast.
And while we're in this brief Solus thing, you had this Hackfest for Budgie 11. How did that go?
We called it the 11th Budgie, which is a really, really sad reference to Doctor Who. Yeah, I named it that.
I don't watch children's shows, so I don't get that.
Popey is pounding a letter right now, complaining about you calling it a children's show.
It is not a children's show. It is a sophisticated thinking man's program for the man of today and woman or whatever. It's fine. It's for all of us. It's not for children. But if they want to watch and learn about adult life, they can. Anyway, bitch. Anyway, yeah, we did this Hackfest on, I believe it was Saturday, but I'm completely out of it with time zones and shit at the moment. That ran for like 5 seconds short of 7 hours. And yeah, so basically it's just me live streaming, like you got my ugly mug up in the top corner and me just working away on Budgie 11, which is going to be the one that's in queue and running away very, very rapidly from GTK and GNOME stuff. Because reasons.
No offense, but who in their right mind would sit and watch you code?
Just code, probably not. But I mean, I was on there, Brian was on there, Josh was on there. So we was all like chatting over Discord as well. And you could switch between the free camera views at the same time. And mostly just messing about at the same time. Lots of swearing, lots of me fucking up, lots of me wanting to break things and actually breaking things. But some progress as well. And decided to actually drop QML. I know I said before that I was liking Qt Quick, but I've re-dropped QML again.
Heathen.
In favor of what?
In favor of just Qt widgets, like the core widgets. So,
Fair enough.
Yeah, I mean, when I done my first benchmarks and that, and it was looking really good. It was using less less resources than the Budgie panel. But once I started doing more stuff with it and make sure everything uses the same QML engine, it started using twice as much memory as the Budgie panel, doing nothing. So I was like, fuck this. Dropped it. And to be fair, I was hitting a lot of blocks with it. That Q-Quick stuff is what they're using in underneath of that. Was it Kirigami?
Yeah.
The weird plasma thing. But they use QML underneath that, and they've had to create their own widgets and their own containers and everything on top of it. Because Q-Quick 2 is designed Q-Quick Controls 2 is designed just for phones. Like, everything about it is clearly designed for phones. And honestly, it's not appropriate for any form of desktop application if you want to have anything like native widgets. And obviously, I'm not building a desktop application, but there are going to be certain desktop-y type things I'm trying to do. And it was too much of a pain in the arse. And then there was weight on top of it. And the fact that it's JavaScript inside, and I just got stressed out with it on the live stream, so we just kicked it out and started doing things with normal Qt widgets, and actually made a lot of progress at that point. To the point we've actually now got the very beginnings of an applet API already in place, which is kind of cool.
Look, when you want to get from one version of Budgie to the next, you do indeed need a montage.
Yes, well, our description says something about Ikey being told to shut up about Solus, so shut up about Solus. All right, so this episode of Late Night Linux is sponsored by Entroware. And Entroware are a dedicated Linux computer seller based in the UK. And they sell computers with Ubuntu and Ubuntu Mate, 16.04 and 17.04. And they are a company who actually care about Linux. They've got all sorts of Linux laptops and a couple of desktops and a server. And their laptops range from fairly low spec, affordable ones, right the way up to really beefy ones with dedicated graphics. And so they're basically suitable for anyone who wants to run Linux, whether it's just a bit of email and web browsing all the way through to 3D art and video editing and machine learning and graphic design, that kind of thing. And they ship to the United Kingdom, Republic of Ireland, France, Germany, Italy, and Spain. And I'm sitting here recording this on an Entroware laptop that I'm really happy with. And I'm sure if you buy one, you will be too. And if you do buy one, mention us at checkout. There's a box you can put Late Night Linux in, and then they'll know we sent you. So check out entroware.com for all your Linux computing needs. So onto a bit of admin then, and thank you everyone for supporting us on PayPal and Patreon. Very much appreciated. And if you want to join them, you can go to latenightlinux.com/support. And there are a few other ways as well. There's Bitcoin and stuff. We had one of those recently, so thank you very much. I asked a few episodes ago for ideas for Patreon perks that you might want, because at the moment we don't have any paywalls or anything like that. It's free if you want it, or you can contribute, and it's really appreciated if you do. But if you've got any ideas for what might make you support us if you do, or feel like you would like to have if you do, I don't know. We're just unoriginal and unimaginative. We can't think of anything to put on there. So if you can, then do get in contact with us. latenightlinux.com/contact for all the ways to get in touch, with email and Telegram group and Twitter and all that kind of thing. So all software has bugs, but I asked the question, should it? I don't accept this. I am not a coder. I'm not a programmer. I don't know how to write software. Right? I know how to do a few things, and when I do it, I don't fuck it up, generally speaking. Occasionally I fuck it up, okay, but I don't accept that I'm going to fuck it up as a matter of course. Whereas it seems that software, it's just accepted. There is an accepted axiom that it's going to be shit, it's going to need patching because of mistakes that people have made. Now, I put it to you that that's bullshit. We should not have that situation. People should spend a bit more time testing their code and getting better at writing it in the first place, and we shouldn't have bugs, or certainly nowhere near as many bugs as we have. And I get the feeling you're now about to argue against that.
Just a tad. Right, me first, and then you can come in to finish them.
Go on.
Do you use anything outside of what you intended to do for? Like, do you open a cupboard with your TV remote control by throwing it at it?
No.
Do you do anything outside the normal? Because every piece of software isn't used the way it was generally designed to be used. I am pretty sure somebody does something with it, puts it on something it wasn't designed to be run on. The myriad of bloody machines there are, conditions, other conflicting software. It's just impossible to write that perfectly. You just can't.
Well, hang on a minute, right? So the Bluetooth bug that Joe mentioned earlier in the show that's affecting Android devices at the moment, that is a Bluetooth bit of hardware which is in phones, Android which is written for phones to use that Bluetooth device, and there's a bug in it.
It's talking to unenviable amounts of shitey bits of kit that people don't want to pay money for. They want to pay the cheapest price for the crappiest gear, and they want it to be looking the best, and they don't care what the software is. They don't pay for that. But you've got so many different bits of software stacked talking to each other. There's no chance in hell that any of it's going to be bug-free. It just isn't.
You're saying there's too much?
No, I'm just saying that if people want things to be easy, you need more code. I mean, I'm pretty sure the code they wrote on those fucking mainframes, they had to literally plug in fucking wires and screw thermionic diodes in, was pretty fucking flawless until actual moths crawled into the fucking machine and we got actual bugs in it. But if you want things to be fucking usable so you can fucking scratch your arse, drive your car, and then also pick what music track you want to do, there's not a fucking hope in hell that thing is going to not have a bug in it because you want it to be easy and touchy and ooh. Frankly, make things harder and there will be less bugs.
I still don't entirely... I mean, I wasn't entirely on Joe's side to start with, but you're making me more on Joe's side. So, good.
Oh, God.
Right, you're an engineer, right? Has steel changed massively in the last 1,000 years?
All right, ignoring, stainless and high tensile strength, all that kind of stuff, yeah.
Yeah, no, but in principle, it bends, it shatters, it stretches. It doesn't do other stuff.
But the point is that you can make very complicated bridges with the basic building blocks of steel, and you have something way more complicated than just a block of steel, but it still works because someone's...
This is a bad example.
It's fucking easy, though. It's a fucking bridge. It's a flat platform suspended across a gap.
You remember the Millennium Bridge, don't you?
I do remember the Millennium Bridge.
Want to talk about bugs in engineering?
Yes.
Yeah. So they built a bridge and people go across it. That was great. And then something happened that nobody expected. People naturally get into a lockstep as they're going across, and it started to stress the bridge too much because it wasn't designed with that use case in mind.
Yes, because whoever designed it was a fucking idiot.
No, they couldn't have possibly known that. They didn't know that because it was the first time it happened. That's why it had that bug.
I guess you've never seen a leaking pipe in a house either. I mean, that is a fucking tube that passes water.
Look, anything that's ever manufactured is not perfect. If you look at anything you've ever bought, there is always a manufacturing defect, no matter how subtle it is. There is no perfect thing that has ever been built. Even with 3D printing, you cannot possibly make something perfectly. And then when you want different unrelated systems to link into each other, if you've got 70 people shouting in a room, one guy is going to get lost in there. One guy isn't going to have his voice heard. And that's basically what it's about. Can you design things so they're going to be bug-free? You can try as much as you can. But the fact is the processes change over time. Going back to how we do steel, how we've built things with steel and how we made steel ready, that's changed. Steel itself hasn't, but how we've done that has changed. And as we learn things, we don't do those things anymore. Look at where the industry is now with programming languages, right? Years ago, there was a certain way of doing things and programming languages were at a certain level. A lot of the bugs that you hear about nowadays, it's simply some really, really old C code that everyone's been relying on and ignoring for the last 10 odd years or more. But if you was to write it today, it wouldn't necessarily be written the same. It's using old practices and how the industry was then. Once we learn these things, we don't do them in future, so the industry evolves and we're less prone to make the same mistakes again. But you have to make mistakes to learn from them. And yes, okay, there is the flip side of that. Some software is just really shit. And some people shouldn't write code. But some people shouldn't be carpenters.
And also, it's one of those days of, back in the old days, you could be really good at physics. I think pretty sure I heard Ack make this point fucking ages ago. You could be really good at physics by doing a bit of study for a couple of weeks and ta-da, you're up to scratch. Whereas now, you can do an entire PhD spent on progressing it forward by, tiny, tiny amounts Well, coding, if you step in and you're going to just, I'm going to wade in to do a bit of kernel code here. What experience do I have? None. Let's get going. It's like you can do it. You probably shouldn't. But if you do get good, it's only by like decades probably of learning that you're going to be anyway decent.
And you do start to specialize in certain areas, because there was a time when computers were a lot simpler. And I think that's why people enjoy writing things like emulators, because to them, it's more of a perfect system, at least how I interpret it. It's more of a perfect system. There are less moving parts, and you have to do more to get exactly what you want out of it. I mean, look at the pioneering processes they had in place for Mario and Sonic, the sort of things they had to push these systems to do. But now they're so complicated, they're unbelievably complicated, where any random set of circumstances can lead to something happening in your program. There's too many moving parts. I don't think you can account for all of them. And then if you take all of that aside, it's how do people use your software? So to give an example, say like with Budgie, some of the bug reports I get, which people genuinely believe are bugs, they'll report to me that I can't use this key combination to change my input language. And then I will tell them, no, it's super in space. Yeah, but on Windows, I use control and blah, blah, blah. Some arcane situations. It's like, okay, but that's not the same software. We're not going to do that. Your stuff is shit. This is a bug.
Yeah, well, obviously that's bollocks, but...
Well, no, but that's what a lot of bug reports are like. People misunderstanding that something out of the scope, or something that isn't intended as a feature, or a use case that isn't supported, they believe it's a bug because it's not there. Not that it's not wanting to be supported, or that's not what it's designed for. I think for a lot of people, they do misunderstand what really constitutes a bug. A bug is literally doing something wrong you've got an expected outcome and it doesn't do that. That's what really a bug is. And those do exist by their droves, don't get me wrong.
But it's just this attitude. It's this attitude that I think comes about because of software churn, right? Because developers going to develop. So instead of, for example, GNOME 2, right? I hate to use that example. No, I love to use that example, right? GNOME 2 was basically finished, right? As Mate...
and still shit. But anyway.
Well, whatever, KDE lover. But GNOME 2 was in pretty good shape, right? And
disagree.
And okay, the Mate team have taken that code and progressed it. But why do we need to constantly have innovation, is my question.
Because of users. Because nobody wants to have the same thing. Your project will be dead and nobody on it. I mean, if you want to go for... say the Leaning Tower of Pisa is a prime architectural example of how things are never finished until that thing sinks pretty much all the way down into the ground. They're going to still keep adding weight alternately on different sides to balance the damn thing out. I mean, it's a fucking tower. Just build it or knock it down and rebuild it.
I had a good response to you for a second there when you said, like, people want change and all the rest of it. And I'm like, no, I want XFCE that just never changes and does exactly what I want.
Only you and 5 other people who write XFCE want no change in software.
All right, ignoring Joe's very unique point, which I think is the right point, because look at Windows. When Windows moved over to Windows 8 and did something new and shiny, everyone threw their laptops down the drain and just walked away, and they had to go back to doing the standard thing. So you can't tell me that the thousands and thousands of people that use Microsoft Windows don't want something to be standard and the way it was.
No, they do. They want it to change, but they want it to be nice when it's changed. Metro was terrible. I mean, Windows 10 is different than Windows 7. It's different than XP. It's different than 2000. And it's most definitely different than Windows 3.1 for workgroups. Or 3.11 before anybody fucking types in. Jesus. So, people do want change. They don't want to sit there looking things because they'll see someone else who has something different. Unless you ban all companies from changing their code, people are going to look at something else and go, oh, I want that.
So is this still about bugs or hiding our heads in the sand from change?
If we're back to the bugs thing, I think that you made the point, Ikey, there that you had the old C code that was maybe been used for ages. And I would argue that C code was either written to do one thing specifically, and if a bug was found years later, then Joe's point still exists. It should have been written better in the first place. And and the too many moving parts, the changes, the new coding parameters that come out, it does sound like it's very much standing on the shoulders. And if you use a very low level language compared to languages which are further and further away, you end up just assuming that things further down the stack are working nicely without really knowing quite how it's going. Which was your point, Ikey, about the emulators and things. It's a very pure bit of coding. So I wonder whether it is there's this standing on the shoulders of giants and just assuming that these are the shortcuts that are available to me by using that code.
I don't think you can ever possibly know all of the libraries that are out there and read them all. I mean, you've got to at some point expect someone else knows what they're doing, or if they're not, they're going to look after it. Like, I wouldn't touch anything to do with secure connections and stuff like that, because that's fairly decent levels of maths, I mean, it's not rocket science, but geez, it's something I'm never going to touch.
Yeah, never roll your own crypto is the rule, isn't it?
Exactly. Yeah, so, I mean, I'm not going to touch it. I'm going to have to leave that to someone else to do. But, that's also assuming that those people are infallible, and nobody is infallible, so they're not going to be able to write perfect code. Or they wrote the perfect code and then a new compiler comes along because it's on a new processor and it's going to have a bug in the hardware,
Which has been known to happen.
Well, okay, can I put another controversial point forward? Not everyone who writes code should write code, as far as I'm concerned.
I think that's fair to a point, yeah.
Okay, they can write code, but perhaps not deploy it and sell it as a viable project with its own GitHub page and logo and branding. We all know what I mean.
It just seems to me that maybe it's easier with FOSS, I don't know, but the barrier to entry is pretty low, especially with Python and stuff. And people
Stop ragging on bloody Python, for God's sake.
No, all I'm just saying is Python is quite easy to get started with, and then people get carried away and without the proper experience think that they are a coder now, I'm a programmer, when in reality they're someone who is dabbling with it.
Wait. Joe goes around smashing up copies of Cubase in the shop just so people don't think they're musicians, I'd say, as well.
Yeah, not everyone who plays music should fucking play music. Don't get me started on
but
that.
now you're taking away their freedom to play music if they wish to.
Right, they can play it in their flat like I do, but playing it publicly, anyway,
you don't
that's
have to
art.
listen.
That's different. Yeah, and you don't have to use their software, of course. But it seems to me that because anyone is free to do it, it sort of lowers the standards, and it sort of brings in this expectation that there's going to be bugs. Whereas if the people writing code were all experienced and knew what they were doing, then we would have far fewer bugs, and there would be less of an expectation that you're going to have bugs in everything, and just everything's going to need to be patched down the line at some point.
But, right, let me ask you the question. If you have to be experienced to write code, how do you get experience?
Well, that's the catch-22 of life, Ikey.
No, that's the catch-22 of 60s life in the world, where you weren't allowed to progress. It just doesn't apply anymore. But nowadays, we're a lot luckier because we have all the mistakes of humanity behind us already, and a few more to make, don't get me wrong. We have stuff now that you didn't used to have 10, 20 years ago. We have tools for static analysis. We have tools that looks at software and says, you're a dickhead, fix it, right? Which people should use. But I think if you build software with the right mindset, it doesn't really matter how experienced you are, because you're going to make those mistakes. You're going to have things tell you these are wrong. You shouldn't take the easy path. You should be doing things like having test suites if you can, if it's possible, and using all the tooling to your advantage, because this is tooling that's compounded on the mistakes of everyone else. And it can look at your code and tell you if you're doing things wrong, if you're doing things by the book. Python makes it very easy to do that. So use your Python as an example, right? Yes, anyone can get into it. But if people who are taking up programming decided to make life a tiny bit harder for themselves and use things like flakes and pep to make sure that their code is actually consistent with the language guidelines, they would get a lot further on. It would promote clean programming practices, and they would be able to spot their own bugs a lot easier. It's the same as like if you're picking up C. Don't just start following the online documentation which says, just use GCC and point it at the C file. No, turn all of the fucking warnings on. It's going to make it take a little bit longer for you to learn, but you're not going to want to sit there with your code emitting fuckloads of compiler warnings. You're going to fix them. And that's your first guard before you even get your code out to the public world. Also, don't use Vala.
There's a solid arguments, and having dabbled in some code, I know all those warnings, and you can normally ignore them or do it properly, and you're more likely to get into good habits, is maybe the sort of fundamentals of what you're talking about. But I wonder whether there is, like, that's just making sure the code is elegantly written, but you can still write, fundamental flaws into it. And do we need better QA procedures? Or, like, if there was a QA server that you could throw your code at and say, churn through that and find if there's known errors and bugs and vagrants in there that we can pull out.
This is the coding QA software that has clearly been written by God himself and is flawless. Therefore, there's no flaws in it.
Well, you saying that. So, I mean, when it comes to the security aspect, so that's a different angle entirely. There's usability break-in, which is going to be someone saying something like, I opened 1,000, one bug I genuinely had before, someone told me, at a previous employment opportunity, we shall say. I opened 100 Nautilus windows on my machine and it became unresponsive. You think, right? It had like 2 gigs of RAM or something. You fucking think, right? So you'd want to avoid that side, but there are now fuzzing services, and this is the hot stuff right now in the security field, right?
Yeah, that's just what I was going to say. Fuzzing. That's the solution.
Yeah, so fuzzing is what you want to do. If you're doing any kind of message handling or input handling, basically, if the input doesn't come from you, validate it. Right? Anything that's going to come from an external process or a user, treat them as the same. You can't fucking trust that gobshite vampire giving you stuff, right? Not that I'm calling my users gobshite vampires, right? It's just
to me.
It's just unverified input. So use the fuzzing services that are out there. Try and get your code coverage up if you can. There's stuff like coveralls.io. You can have like builds on Travis. So every Git commit you're making, fucking use Git as well, by the way. Make sure your code is on GitHub, using Git, using good practices. Hook up test suites, hook up all of the free test services. What else is there? There's, Coverity. If you're using Java, C or C++, every build you're doing, you can have it automated so it scans your code for any known bad paths or vulnerabilities while you're doing it. All this stuff exists now. It didn't exist for the bugs that we're now fixing. So you hear about things like the Bluetooth bugs. Well, maybe for those. Okay, maybe for those. But like old libpng stuff, free type. When those were written, those code fuzzing services, those coverall stuff, none of that existed back then. So if you have any open source code you're doing or starting on, just start integrating them with all the fucking things and make sure it's always checked.
Integrate all the things. I like that.
Yeah. And they're all free anyway. Well, they're free in price.
What, proprietary software that happens to be free as in beer?
That's negative good in the freedom dimension.
It sure is.
Mm.
Oh, that could be your next project. Set up a free one.
Yes, good idea. Well, no doubt we'll get lots of comments about that.
About how wrong you and Jesse were, yes.
No, everyone will be agreeing with me and saying, yes, we need.
And they'll be complaining about me. I am a fuck. I can't even word. I'm just stressed out now. Continue without me.
On that bombshell, then, we should bring it to an end. So we'll be back in 2 weeks. And in the meantime, then, I've been Joe.
I've been Jesse Joe.
I've been Jesse Phelan.
I've been Jesse Ikey.
No, you were supposed to say Phelan Ikey. Anyway, whatever. See you later.
Slán.